Pete Vowles, the British Ambassador to Zimbabwe.
And I'm FoLake, the Nubian Queen, the International African.
So I've been in Zimbabwe for about a year now, nowhere near as long as FoLake obviously, but during that time hearing so many stories about Zimbabweans living in the UK, achieving incredible things, whether that be in science, in tech, in arts, in publishing, in accountancy. So FoLake and I decided to host a podcast series to talk to some of these individuals and have a cup of tea in each episode and learn a bit about their journey, hear what they've been doing, hear what they're proud of, any advice they have for young people starting out in their careers today. So I hope you'll be as inspired as we are. Who's our guest today, FoLake?
We're so excited to have the multi-talented creative Samantha Rumbidzai Vazhure, who's based in the UK. 4 years ago, she went and started her own printing company, Carnelian Heart, where she's been helping amplify many African voices. As a creative wearing multiple hats, from being a novelist, an editor, a translator, short story writer, she is also a visual artist extraordinaire. Did I also mention that Sam is a lawyer, and after she tried to get her own book published the first time, she decided, why don't I set up my own publishing book? Talk about being creative. Based in Wales, we found her being a bilingual wordsmith. She's also helping other Africans while she's there amplify their work. From publishing their own books to curating anthologies, she's also empowering individuals. So we're so excited to meet you, Sam. What a true champion you are.
Yeah, so I gather Sam, you'll tell us about this, but I gather you with enormous courage decided not to take no for an answer and decided to publish the book yourself. And as you say, didn't stop just there, but wanted to help other Zimbabwean authors get their work published. Sam, tell us about the journey of writing your first book and getting it published.
Well, first of all, thank you so much for having me. It's a pleasure to speak with you guys. So, the first book I wrote, I actually wrote in my mother language, Chikaranga, which is a dialect of Chishona from Machingo. So I wrote Shazukwa Msango, and I wanted to get it published. And then it was at that point when I was writing the poetry, I had no idea of, I had no idea of the state of the publishing industry in Zimbabwe. I just assumed that once I get it, once I finished writing and want to get it published, I will approach a publishing house in Zimbabwe to get it published. But it was at that point that I realized or found out from colleagues, from other writers, that there wasn't much of an industry back home. Most of the reputable publishing houses had closed. So I then decided that, I'll just self-publish the book. So I took it to Amazon, where most people self-publish their work. And it was at that point that I discovered that Amazon has something called an authorized languages list, which means if your language is not on their list, then you can't publish it. And of course, Shona wasn't there. So at that point I started researching how else I could get my book out, because I didn't want to sort of do it illegally or the wrong way on Amazon, because I think some people just go in, on the language, even if they've written in a language that's not on their list, they'll just add that it's English. So I didn't want to do that. I think the lawyer said he wouldn't allow me to go and lie that I'd written the book in English when it wasn't. So I then discovered a wholesaler that allow me to publish through them, but the work had to come via a publisher. So at that point I thought, why don't I just start my own publishing company so that I can publish this book? And I think the reason for that was so that someone could take accountability of the content that was in that book. And that's exactly how Carnelian Heart was born. I needed to publish my Shona poetry book, and I couldn't do it as an individual, so I ended up establishing Carnelian House for that reason, and it works.
Yeah, very interesting. We also hear, Sam, that one of your first book was written on WhatsApp. That must have been a painstaking process.
Yes, so once I sort of published my own work, I went on social media to market my work. I then released a few other books, and that's as I was releasing other books, I then so connected with other Zimbabweans on social media, and then that's when I realized how big the problem of publishing was back home, because a lot of people seemed to be writing but had no means of getting their work out into the world. So as I was sort of just doing my marketing, trying to market the few books I published, a guy called Vice Ganga approached me. He sent me a message message on Twitter and said, I've written a novel. He'd actually written several books, but he said, I've got one novel that I'd like published. Would you be able to publish it for me? So when I said, well, send me the manuscript, the first thing he said is, well, I've written it on WhatsApp, so I don't know how to send it to you. And so we had kind of had to figure out a way for him to sort of download the novel that he'd written. It sort of created a group on WhatsApp where it was just, I think it was just him and his wife in the group, and he was writing the whole novel on WhatsApp. Eventually we figured out a way. He sent me the file, and then I converted it into a Word document, with a view to read it and edit it. But that's how he had done it, because he didn't have a laptop or a PC, he didn't have a word processor, he just wrote the whole thing on WhatsApp. And of course, the first thing I worried about as an editor was, if this guy hasn't used the word processor, how are the typos going to be? How are the grammatical errors going to be? I was a bit worried about that. But I was pleasantly surprised that, the manuscript barely had any mistakes. It was almost perfect. So Vais had clearly spent years writing this book and, perfecting it. And it was just really a joy to read the story. And that's how Once Upon a Time came to be. This is his book, and it's a beautiful story about an adventure story, sort of highlighting the Karanga culture. He wrote it in English, and it's written in English, but it sort of teaches people about how the Karanga lived. It's a pre-colonial story, so it was how the Karanga people lived before Zimbabwe was colonized. And I just found it really interesting because it's clearly a book that teaches about our culture before things started changing for Zimbabweans. So yeah, that's how Once Upon a Time came to be. It's one of the first novels I published at Carnelian Heart.
That's incredible. I can only imagine, my grammar on WhatsApp, but trying to have a whole book out of it is incredible. The skills to be able to do that and to keep the thread going through WhatsApp messages. Fantastic. Sam, I read recently. I read another one of your books, The Brilliance of Hope. And I thought it was wonderful, a bit overwhelming in times, sort of anthology of diaspora stories, whether in South Africa or in the UK. I wonder, how did you find these stories, and how did you choose them when you were putting that together?
Well, thank you first of all for supporting Carnelian by reading our work. So Brilliance of Hope was the second anthology of short stories I produced at Carnelian. And at the time I did it, I had kind of established a presence on social media. So I was always getting inquiries from writers asking when I would do the next anthology. They were interested in contributing to the anthology. So what I did when I was ready to work on this book is I reached out to, I headhunted the writers basically, because I work mostly, solo at Carnelian. So it's very difficult for me to, at the time actually, it was difficult for me to sort of go on social media or wherever to announce that, hey, I'm creating an anthology. If anyone's got a manuscript, if anyone's writing, please send me your work, because I would have been overwhelmed with messages and I probably wouldn't have been able to read all of them. So what I thought I would do is to approach individuals that I knew were writers. Some of them I was already connected with them on social media. Some of them I'd heard about them. Some of them I was reading their works on from literary journals. So it was very easy for me to identify people who wrote well. And I also wanted to make it an anthology of Zimbabwean writers who were based abroad and back home. So that's how I curated it. So I just tried to identify people in various countries, because I wanted it to be balanced. I didn't want it to be just Zimbabweans in the UK or just Zimbabweans in South Africa. So I also had to make sure that I had people from all over the place. So there are writers from who are based in the UK, some in States, some in South Africa, some back home in Zimbabwe, some I think there was a guy in Dubai and Australia. So it was really nicely balanced that way. But I think the short answer is I had to headhunt the writers.
Sounds like quite a process. You were also talking about how it started off wanting to write your book in Chikaranga, which is also my natural language. Sewe Sam. I wanted you to tell us a little bit more about other languages that you're writing in. Are there any others outside Chikaranga and English? And how do you market your books in Zimbabwe as well as the UK?
Okay. So personally, I write in Chikaranga and in English.
Mm-hmm.
But the authors I publish, so far they've written in various dialects of Shona and English as well. But at the moment, I'm actually working on 3 collections of poetry that are written in other languages. Like Chindau, Chewa, Isindebele, the various other languages that we have in Zimbabwe. There's quite a lot of that coming. And the reason it's taken me so long to be able to bring that sort of work, to work on that sort of work at Carnelian is I had to recruit or headhunt editors who are experts in those languages to make sure that, whatever work is produced in those languages is of very high quality, because one of the things I'm very particular about at Carnelian is to produce good quality work. So because my own language abilities are limited, I wanted to make sure that I'll find and work with professional editors in the other various languages that are spoken in Zimbabwe. So we've got a lot coming. There's going to be a children's book in Isindebele as well. There's going to be poetry in various other languages, and that's all coming in the next few months. And then in terms of marketing, there are various ways. Carnelian being a very sort of small independent press, we don't have much of a budget, much of a marketing budget. So we try to use, the cheapest ways possible to market the work, and the obvious being social media. So Carnelian is on the major social media outlets. So we're on Instagram, X, which was Twitter, Facebook, and LinkedIn. We also have a website, and that's quite a big marketing tool for us. We tend to, advertise the books we've just published there, and any things we're doing. So earlier this year, we had a short story competition, an Africa-wide short story competition. So we're able to use our website to communicate things like submission guidelines and the call-outs for that. We also get our books reviewed in newspapers or on the radio or on shows, in the media. We've got very good relationships with journalists and people who work in the media, or just book reviewers. So those are also various ways we get our books marketed. Once in a while, you'll see someone writing articles about us in the local newspapers in Zimbabwe. So there's a lot of interest in the work we're doing, and I think all of that helps to market the work we're doing without having to sort of spend a big budget on marketing.
As a student, as I continue to learn Shona myself, I'm looking forward. My ambition has to be able to read, to get to reading some of your books in Shona or poetry in Shona, as an objective.
Fantastic.
I'm still some way off that, I think. But anyway,
You're close.
So Sam, you grew up and went to school. You said in Masvingo. Were you an avid reader then? What were you reading as you grew up in Masvingo?
I wouldn't claim to have been an avid reader, but I studied the arts, so I always had a keen interest in reading the books that I had to read. So I read. So for A level, for example, I read. I did divinity, Shona, and literature in English, and those 3 subjects alone, I think I had over 20 books to read. And I think I sort of had a burnout after that, and I didn't read that much after high school. And I think we also had a culture, and it's probably still there. There wasn't really a culture of reading growing up. So we tended to just read what we had to read, and we also read to pass. We would read so that we'd pass exams and not really for entertainment. And I think that background is actually one of the reasons I continue to publish at Carnelian. And recently we've started publishing children's books as well, because we want to catch them early and try to change that culture. Because as we were growing up, we never really encouraged to read for pleasure. We read to pass our exams. So one of the things I would really want to see changing in our culture, I don't know if it's an Africa-wide culture, but certainly in Zimbabwe, I think we need to encourage children to read books for pleasure, not just to pass exams. So one of the things we've started doing is actually releasing children's books, and we've released 2 this year, and I'm really excited for the other ones that are coming. So yeah, I hope that will make an impact, because one of the things I like to do is to do things that are intentional and purposeful, and things that actually shape how things are going in the world of literature for Zimbabwe.
I find it incredible, Sam, that you have time to do all these things, being a translator, an editor, being a publisher, and you've got a daytime job, which is pretty incredible in finance as well as governance as a consultant. Where do you find the time to do all these things, firstly? And tell us about your first jobs. Was this in the UK?
Yeah, so it's, to be honest with you, it feels almost impossible sometimes. Like, I'm so busy. But what I've done is, in terms of my formal line of work or my employment, I work as a consultant. So that means I can decide when or when not to work, and I tend to work short-term contracts. So when I'm working short-term contracts, I kind of take a step back from the publishing, and I'm not working as much or releasing as much books. And when I'm in between contracts, I have more free time, so that's when I do more editing. That's when I'm doing a lot of the production work. So when I'm then back at work, I'm mostly maybe just marketing or maybe releasing books that have already been worked on. But so that's sort of a summary, a high-level summary of how I balance my formal work and the publishing. But I think, generally speaking, one just has to be really disciplined. I mean, I don't have much of a social life, so I tend to just spend most of my time working on producing the books. I mean, for instance, I'm a visual artist, and when I want to relax, I paint. So, but in a way, it's also work, because I produce the visual arts in order to sell it, so that I can afford to keep producing the books I'm publishing at Carnelian. So yeah, it's there's a lot of having to balance I juggle many balls, but I think one of the main things maybe that's important to mention is just trying to keep healthy. I go for walks, I take long walks, I hike, and I find that when I do that, when I go outside and breathe in that fresh air and get some exercise, I come back energized. So I always have that energy. And I find that if I go for a week, for example, without walking, I can feel my energy depleting. So it's just a combination of many things: being disciplined, loving what I do, keeping the body that maintaining the body that produces the work. So it's there's just a lot of little things that I do and that I juggle. But there's a lot of multitasking going on. But I think one of the biggest things is I love what I do, and I think that's again a driving force behind.
Yeah, we can tell.
You can tell, yeah. Your energy and drive is really really infectious, Sam. You're not actually, interestingly, you're not the first guest we've had on the podcast who's kind of reinvented themselves mid-career or decided to take on another, change direction, or add something on. Have you got any tips for other people who might be thinking there's something out there they might want to do, but they've got a kind of linear job to do, but they're thinking about branching out, trying something new? Any tips?
Yeah, no, I think when you have a passion, it's good to maybe try and link what you do, in your day job with your passion. So, for example, I didn't have any publishing experience when I got into publishing. I sort of self-taught, and I also relied on advice and speaking to experienced people and all that stuff. But there's a lot of transferable skills that I brought from my normal line of work. At work, I do a lot of writing. I do a lot of project management. So there's stuff that you have learned, and stuff that you probably take for granted, actually. You don't realize that you could take that to your passion. But I think the biggest advice is that just maybe be aware of the things you do every day at work that you could transfer to your passion project. It's very possible to do it that way, because I didn't realize that I could. I took for granted what I do at work. When you're writing reports, for example, it's a sort of boring sort of writing. But if you can write a report with no typos and you're being careful, you can take that energy elsewhere. You can write fiction using the same skills. You can be, if for example, at work I'm reviewing maybe, I don't know, marketing materials from the from the marketing department or sales department to ensure that whatever is there is clear, fair, and not misleading to customers in the financial services. I can take the same skills to editing, making sure that whatever someone's written makes sense. It's all adding up. It's not misleading. It's believable. So I think just being aware of the skills you can transfer really helps to transition from your normal line of work to your passion project.
Sam, thank you so much for being such a shining example of what it can be like to pursue your passions, but also still, find yourself doing something professionally. If you were to say something to a girl, somebody who's in boarding school, or even if she's a day scholar, what is it that you would like to say to her about pursuing her passion in writing, but also still have a successful professional career like yours?
Well, I think maybe two things. The first would be, be passionate, about the thing you want to do. And by that, I mean, be intentional. Make more effort. So, for example, you might find someone who says, "Oh, I'm a writer," right? But maybe you go on their social media profile. There's nothing that suggests that they write. They don't. They don't even talk about it. So, how can you claim that you like writing or that you're a writer when there's nothing to suggest that you do that? And then there's things like keep sort of continuous development in what you do. Some people will write once and they think, "Oh, I'm great as it is. I'm not gonna develop my skills." But so many things you could do as a writer to better your writing, because you need to keep improving so that you keep people interested in your work. So things like maybe submitting your work to literary journals or to short story competitions or poetry competitions. Like, it's a great way of keeping, putting yourself out there so that people know that you exist. People know what your passion is so that they can support you. And it doesn't have to be something as big as competitions or whatever. People can get together even at school, form a little writers group in boarding school, in your dormitory even, and discuss writing. Maybe write little pieces of work and gather on a weekly basis or monthly basis and critique each other's work, because that's how you improve. So I think just being passionate and continuing to develop yourself as an artist is one of the best ways of cultivating yourself as an artist. And then the other thing I would say is just be true to yourself. Try to keep reminding yourself who you really are, because if you stay true to yourself, then whatever you write is authentic, and other people can then easily relate to it. Because if you kind of write pretentious stuff or lies or whatever, I think people can see through it, and other people can read it and think, I can't relate to this. There's no way this is real. So I think it's good to be authentic in yourself and to just continue to be aligned with who you really are, because that's how you produce work that other people can relate to.
Brilliant. Great advice, Sam. And your authenticity shows through yourself as well. But thank you for sharing your journey and such incredible insights with us today. It's been really, really great to talk to you. And to our listeners, we hope you found this conversation as inspiring as we did. I hope you'll join us again for another MaAmbassador Edu.
It's Capital 100.4 FM Harare's Heartbeat. Until our next cup of tea with Pete and Folake. Thank you so much, Sam. Until next episode.